My name is Jennifer Dixon, and I'm the camera person, and our veteran is being interviewed by Alicia Anderson. We are interviewing Mr. Ernest Portner. Today's date is January 7, 2005, and we are interviewing at RFA Library.
What is your full name?
Ernest Leigh Portner.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Rome, New York on August 17th, 1933. The old Murphy Memorial Hospital, where the skating rink is now, up by Thrones Pond.
What was your education before you entered the service?
Just grade school and high school.
What occupation did you hold before you entered the military?
Logging, sawmilling, working in the woods.
What branch of the military were you in?
Ordnance.
Did you enlist?
No, I was drafted.
How did you and your family feel about that?
I felt good because I was glad to serve my country.
Where did you receive training?
I went to Fort Devens, Massachusetts for my major issue of clothes and that, and then they shipped me right to Aberdeen Proving Grounds, Maryland for my basic.
What did you learn during the training?
I learned how to obey orders and take orders. I learned how to survive.
Do you feel it was necessary or helpful?
Oh yes, very.
Why or why not? Or why?
Pardon?
Why did you feel it was
Because
necessary?
I learned a lot of things that I could use later in my lifetime that helped out a lot through my military training.
What unit were you assigned to?
I was in 705th Ordnance Company B when I went to Germany.
What was the highest rank you held?
Private first class.
How did you earn this?
Well, I guess just a lot of hard work, I guess. They wanted to promote me to corporal before I left, but I said, no, I'm going home, so.
When did you leave for Germany?
March the 6th, 1954.
How did you feel when you got there? What was your first impression?
It was different. It was exciting and a little nervous, but it was, I didn't know what to expect right off the bat, but it didn't take long to find. A lot of Germany was still bombed out and in ruins when I got there. The buildings were still bombed out. But I arrived in Bremerhaven by ship for 2 weeks on the ship, and then I went by train from Bremerhaven to Augsburg, where the main company, the 705th Ordnance Battalion's main company was in Augsburg, and then from there I was only there about 3 weeks, and from there I went to Munich I was TDY to the 759th Tank Battalion, mechanic.
What were your duties there?
Well, mainly we worked on M47 tanks, changing engines and transmissions. Once in a while we'd work on a half-track, and sometimes we'd work on 2.5-ton trucks. Once in a while we'd change a Jeep engine, but it was mainly tanks we worked on.
Did you have to perform any special or unusual duties?
No, not really. Just one time I had to fix a helicopter engine. I never worked on one of those before, but we got it fixed. So.
What did you think about the country and its civilians?
Most of it it's beautiful country. It was beautiful country over there. Civilians weren't too friendly toward American GIs at that time, but we got along all right with them because we tried to be good to them, and we used to give the kids our sea rations and some of the candy and things we had like that, and they didn't think we were too bad, but the older German people still had a resentment for American military.
Can you explain what sea rations are?
Yes, they're army food. They were concentrated. They come in cans, or it was like a hard biscuit you got, and you got a candy bar in there. You got like a can of Spam. It was all canned goods. It was something that you didn't need to keep refrigerated. We used to heat the Spam up on a manifold on a truck to warm it up. But most of it wasn't too appetizing, but it was, in a pinch, it was all right, you know. But we used to take the candy bars out and eat those. But then if there was a bunch of German children around there, they'd all want the candy bars, so we'd take the candy bars out and give them to them. But lots of times they'd take the whole sea rations. There was beans. They had beans, canned beans. There was a can of beans in there. There was a couple of hard biscuits, like a cookie. They were pretty hard. And there was like a can of Spam. There was the candy bar. There was little things of salt and pepper in there for flavoring. But otherwise than that, wasn't too. You could survive on it, but not very appetizing.
Were there any times you had to go without food?
Yes, I did. I went sometimes 3 days. We didn't have any food. We had to go find a German lady. She was baking bread in an outside oven, and we had a big round loaf of black bread. And we bought that from her, and we bought some wurst from. They had a meat market there in the town. We bought a big chunk of German wurst, which is like a bologna. We had that, and we got by till they got back with something to eat for us. But most of the time, the chow was good over there. The food was good, and when it was at the billets, where our barracks was, there was all fresh food. They bring it in from Holland. It was fresh eggs, fresh bacon, and we had better food overseas than we had in the States, in the Army camps in the States.
Did all of the German civilians resent the fact that you guys were there, or did some of them?
No, some of them didn't. Some of them didn't. The younger generation didn't, but the older German people did. A lot of older German people had quite a resentment for the American military, because this wasn't too long after the Second World War. It was in 53, 54. But
what was your daily life there like?
well, we usually get up in the morning about 6, and then we'd go and take calisthenics, and outside we'd do push-ups and stuff. And then we'd fall out for formation, and if they'd take head count and see if we were there or not, call your name and check you off, and then we'd go in and eat our breakfast. Usually that would take about an hour, about 7:30 or so, and then we'd usually either go down to the shop when we're at the station at the billet, at our main barracks. We'd be down to the shop about 8 in the morning. We'd work till 5. We'd come out at noon to have our noon meal over to the mess hall, and then we'd go back about 1 o'clock to start working in the shop again. But when we were out in the field, it was any time you could grab something to eat out there. You just fixed what you had to when you had to. But back when we were stationed at the main buildings, they had a schedule that we ate and like that, and went to work. And then in our evenings, they usually went over to the PX or something, buy something, and then the service club, they'd have movies and stuff going on, and had ping pong tables and billiard tables and stuff they could play, stuff like that there.
Did you get along with the other men in your unit and officers well?
Most all of them I got along with. Most of them are real good guys.
What was your unit like?
Well, we had 12 guys in our ordnance unit that serviced the tankers. We had one sergeant in charge. Well, I had 2 sergeants after a while. 2 sergeants. We had one warrant officer that was ahead of us, that was in charge of us. He'd kind of keep things going and tell us different things to do. And the sergeants, lots of times, they'd work right along with us, working on tanks and things like that. So, but most of the time, we all got along good.
What kind of equipment did you have?
We had the latest that the Army had at the time. We had the tank retriever, the old Sherman tank with a boom on it, and had the 2.5-inch wire rope cable in the turret for towing. And we had M62 wrecker mounted on a 6x6 Army truck, hydraulic crane. We used that a lot for changing engines and like that. And we had our own toolbox, tools, and Otherwise than that, we didn't have too much special equipment. We just worked out of our toolbox and used a wrecker and had our certain tools we used most of the time.
Were you ever in any combat?
No, I wasn't. The Cold War was still going on with Russia, but I never was in any combat.
Were you ever wounded anyways?
No, not. I don't think I even got hurt over there. I might have dug up my fingers a few times changing engines, but otherwise than that, I never was sick over there.
What did you do for recreation or entertainment?
Well, we used to go, during the week I'd go over to the service club and buy a banana split for 25 cents, eat that, and they were big ones too. Then they'd have usually movies going on in there. You know, we didn't have any television at that time, so they had movies. They had ping pong tables and shuffleboard and I think they had a basketball court there too, and had a pool table, and that was about it. And then on weekends, lots of times when I was not out in the field somewhere, we'd go downtown, and I went to the museums in Munich, and which some of that was still bombed out. We went to museums. We went and saw the clock tower on the main square there, where the people come out every hour and turn. We saw that, and then when I was going to tank school in Fusen, we went to Austria, and I went to Switzerland on a weekend. We saw the castles, Ludwig's castles, and things like that. We saw. Otherwise than that, lots of times I just stay in the barracks and rest on the weekends. Sometimes I work Saturdays too over in the shop on engines and things. If they got backlog, they got a lot of things they had to put out. I'd work just to keep busy doing something. But otherwise than that, I just lay around and rest or something.
Did you do a lot of sightseeing?
Some. I'd like to have done more, but I saw a lot of things when we were on maneuvers traveling across to Germany, but we didn't have time much to stop anywhere. So, but I saw a lot of Germany while I was, on traveling with a company to the tankers were moving across Germany. So I saw a lot of the country. I didn't get to see a lot of the main things because still a lot of things were bombed out at that time, and they had to do a lot of reconstruction work yet over there in Germany yet.
What was the most inspiring thing that you experienced while in the military?
Well, I guess working on the different tanks up in the northern part of Germany there, and actually seeing the German people, how they thought about Americans and how they lived and how they did their work and their farming and like that. And I did enjoy when I went to Switzerland and seeing the countryside in Switzerland, because my grandparents came from Switzerland, and I enjoyed seeing that and going there. I enjoyed that the most, I guess.
How was the weather? Was it nice?
Weather was terrible when that first year I got there. It rained for 40 days. Every day we had rain. Some days it would rain constant, 24 hours. And then it would let up a little and it rained more. We had mud. We had almost 1.5 foot of mud everywhere you went. It was terrible. And then it finally let up. For 40 days straight it rained. After that, of course, we were in the southern part of Germany, and we never had much snow down there. Just before I left in March of '55, we had about 1 foot of snow. That was the most snow we had. But otherwise than that, the ground was cold, but the ground was bare. And the weather, most of it was like the weather here in New York State. It was mild, and it was like in the summertime. It'd get pretty warm sometimes in the summertime, but otherwise than that, it wasn't really too bad over there. Because I was in the southern part, but when we went to the northern part of Germany, the weather was cold up there, and up in the Black Forest and like that, it was cold. It got down below zero there when I had frost all over everything. It was pretty cold. We slept in sleeping bags up in there. Otherwise than that, we didn't have much snow. It was a lot of rain. We had a lot of rain over there that first year I was over there.
You had mentioned earlier about a tractor that you would help.
Yeah, there was an old farmer, a German farmer, he couldn't speak any English, and he was working on a tank by his farm site there, and he had trouble and couldn't get his tractor going, and he'd come over and he couldn't speak any English much, but motioned to me to come over and he wanted me to look at his tractor. We mucked around with it, and I think it was in the electrical system there somewhere. And I got it going for him, and he thanked me in German and got going and started out plowing again. So that was a memorable thing that happened over there.
What person do you remember the most?
Oh, my buddies that I worked with, most of them, a fellow, McBride, his name was, from Maine. He was from Allagash, Maine. He was a potato farmer, and he was a logger way up in the top of Maine, up near the St. John, near the Canadian border. And he worked with me most of the time over there. He was my partner that worked with me. I had a couple other fellows that worked with me, but not all the time. But he was the main guy that worked with me. We got along good, and always did work good together.
When were you discharged?
It was June 1955, I think around the 26th of June, somewhere in there.
When did you return to the United States?
Well, I got here, I think it was mid-April. It took us 2 weeks to come over on this ship. It took 14 days to come over. It was, we left out of Bremerhaven, and it took 2 weeks to cross the Atlantic. We had some awful rough weather again. It was awful rough ocean. The waves were 40 to 50 feet high. The ship was rolling pretty bad.
Was that in 56?
No, 55.
55. What did you do when you returned to America?
Well, I went to Fort Dix. I was there for 4 days to muster out. I had to turn a lot of my issue, GI issue, back in. I got to keep some of it, but a lot of it, like my overcoat, and I think I got to keep my overcoat, but my field jacket, I'd turn that in, field jacket. I kept my boots, kept my socks and stuff like that, uniform, I kept that, which is all in my duffel bag in the attic. But I kept that, but a lot of the other things we had to turn back in, and I was there for, I think, 5 days at Dix, and then I was discharged, and I took a train, New York City, and took a train out of Penn Station, I think it was, for Syracuse, coming to Syracuse on train when I was discharged. And then my folks picked me up in Syracuse with a car, come home.
Did you receive any medals or decorations?
No, just overseas medal I received, and good conduct medal, and expert rifleman medal I got. Otherwise than that I didn't, because I never was in any combat.
How did the American civilians treat you?
Well, from what it was in the States, I usually went home every weekend when I was in the States, so I was treated pretty good, because I used to come home and see my best girl, which I married.
What jobs did you have after your time in the Army?
Well, I still went back in the logging business and sawmill, and still at it, still working at it.
Do you go to any reunions or veteran organizations?
No, I haven't. I corresponded with a few fellows, and I haven't heard. I usually hear from them every Christmas, a few of them, but some of them I've lost track of them. Some of them are probably gone by now. I don't know, but I've got 4 or 5 I correspond with yet.
What experience left the greatest impression on you?
I think the experience of going overseas and seeing another country, seeing how other people live in another country, and see how, how in this United States, how well we have it, everything we have is, and the freedoms we have over here. To see how other people live in other countries, and we've got the most freedoms of any country in the world in this country.
Do you feel that time in the military influenced you or changed your life?
Oh yes, very much so.
In what ways?
Well, in learning how to take orders, and learning how to get along with people, and learning what your country really means to you, your patriotism, and your faith in your country, and how to get along with other people. and learn. You learn different things in the military too that go a long ways in the rest of your life, and how you conduct yourself in your future life.
Are there any other stories you'd like to share about your time there?
I don't know.
Sure.
Probably I've got lots of stories if I can remember them, but I know we used to have, we'd get out in other towns, we'd go to these little villages, lots of times we'd break down, and the warrant officer would just leave us there for quite a few days to work on tanks and stuff. And I know one time the tanks held 500 gallons of fuel. It was gasoline, and lots of times the tankers used to have a hand pump there. They pump gas out for different stuff. And this one tank, we got the tankers, I don't know where they'd left it there somewhere, and the German people would come along and they found this pump or something. They were pumping gas out of it into their motorcycles and cars and stuff. When we got ready to start the tank up again, the 500-gallon tank was empty, and the tank hadn't moved because the engine was bad in it. But we got it fixed. We had to call for more fuel. But I remember that. But the tankers had just left it there. They must have went on with their unit or something. We had to fix it. But the tanks were empty, and the tank had gas in it when they left it there, and it hadn't moved. And the 500-gallon tank was pretty empty. So I think the German people got out of gas. So.
How many miles per gallon do those things make?
Oh, you got about 2 miles a gallon. 2 miles to the gallon. And sometimes you didn't get that. Sometimes you got a mile to the gallon. It's very hard on gasoline. Of course, today they got diesels in them there. They're somewhat better. They still burn 3-4 gallons to the mile probably, or the diesels will. They're bigger tanks now. They've got some tanks, 80-ton tanks, big ones I guess now. They take a lot of fuel to move those. But it's diesel. Like I said, they have multi-fuel. Now you can burn either gas, kerosene, or fuel oil or whatever in them. They'll burn any kind of fuel, I guess now, the ones they got now. And most of them are computerized now. It's all computer system on them. Where years ago it was all mechanical systems.
Did the tanks break a lot?
The 47s did. We had an awful problem with them because they were air-cooled engines and oil coolers on the side of the transmissions. And if these oil coolers, the electric motors would burn out on them, and the transmissions would get hot, the oil would get hot, and the engine and the transmissions, and it would seize. It would set the engine up or set the transmission up, and had a lot of problems with them. Now, otherwise than that, they were a good tank, but they had a lot of problems with that cooling system on them.
You said it rained a lot and there was lots of mud. Did that cause a problem when you were fixing?
Yes, it caused a lot of problems. We had to lay in the mud lots of times working on tanks, and sometimes the mud was a foot deep. It was just soup. And you'd lay in the mud working underneath them or something, and mud was in. Sometimes it would bog the tanks down. It was so bad, it was so greasy, the tanks would get stuck, and we'd have to pull them out with either another tank or this tank retriever we had. We had to pull them out. One day we worked a half a day, a little better than a half a day, pulling tanks out of the mud. They pulled in for the night. So they can get stuck. There's no question about it.
Are there any other stories or anything else you'd like to
No, there's probably. When I went to Switzerland on the bus, we saw. I went on that trip. It was 3 days in Switzerland, 2 nights in a motel, and all our meals. It was $25 American money I paid for 3 days and 2 nights in a motel and your meals, $25, which was pretty good. Well, anyways, we went to Lucerne. We saw Lucerne, the Lion of Lucerne. We went to Bern, Switzerland. We saw the bear pit, and which my great-grandfather came from Bern, Switzerland. My grandmother came from St. Stephen. I didn't get there. We went through the main part of Switzerland. Went through some of Austria. We saw the Zugspitze Mountains in Austria, and Otherwise, you had to wear civilian clothes going into Switzerland. You couldn't wear your uniform because it was a neutral country. And it still is a neutral country. But they had their own army. Every man in Switzerland, a male gets 18 years old, you got to go in the army in Switzerland and train. And you got to keep your equipment right in your home with you at an instant's notice to go if you get called. And then the mountains were, you wouldn't believe the mountains in Switzerland. They were zigzag and there was these mountains. But everybody said every one of those mountain passes, there's tunnels in there with gun emplacements and things the Swiss Army's got. In case they ever get invaded, they can stop invaders on the road right there because they can just bombard them from both sides of these mountain passes and stop them. They've got quite a large army. Every man in Switzerland until age 65, I think, has to belong to be in the army and has his own equipment at his house, his gun and everything in the house, and his own helmet and everything, his uniform and everything right in his house, which in Switzerland. But they're a neutral country. They've never been to war with any other country. But they're prepared at all times to go to war in case they get invaded. And that was kind of interesting to know that. And we saw that. We went to St. Moritz ski resort. We stayed overnight in St. Moritz. Big feather bed about that thick it was. You'd sleep in that. We had a continental breakfast the next morning, a cup of coffee and a biscuit it was for breakfast.
More biscuits.
But most of the meals were pretty good over there. I used to go downtown Munich to the Hofbrauhaus. They'd get Wiener Schnitzel dinner in there for about 50 cents American. It was lamb, and then I used to get wurst, bologna, like a blockwurst. The Germans had made a lot of different kind of wurst, bologna and like that. And we'd go there and we'd eat, have a meal there. The meals were real good, reasonable. And then I go down. I bought some cuckoo clocks, and I sent home some beautiful. They had beautiful cuckoo clocks and like that there. I bought those, and I shipped them home. Most of them come through pretty good. I bought a 100-day clock, which was glass enclosed with all brass works. You could see all the works on it. I think that was, they call it a 100-day clock. It'd run for 100 days. You'd wind it and run for 100 days. And I shipped that. I shipped 2 of those home from over there, and they came through pretty good. I sent one to my mother and one to Doris, my wife, my girlfriend at that time.
You had mentioned that you travel up by boat. How was that?
Well, for about the first 4 days out, it wasn't bad. I thought, boy, this is going to be a piece of cake. And then after that, we got out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. This was in March going over, and it stormed for, well, pretty near 10 days. It stormed. We were about 15, 16 days, I think, going over. And only about 4 of those days the ocean was calm. But once we got out in the middle of the ocean, we went back and forth for about 6 days. It rocked back and forth, and then for the next 4 days the propeller would come right out of the water. You could hear the propeller vibrate when it would come out of the ocean. She was dipping endo like that, back and forth. It was rolling. We had a rope. We come up out of where we slept. We had a rope going up through the alleyway to get up on. We had to go up on deck to go to the mess hall and go down in another hole to eat. And you had to hang on to this rope when you got up on top because the ocean, the waves are coming over the side of the railing so bad it would wash you right overboard if you weren't hanging on this rope. But then I got seasick, so I didn't eat much for a few days after that. Everybody was seasick.
All right, thank you very much.
That's it? Okay, you're welcome, very welcome.